Shana Tova, y'all. May it be an amazing year. May we see a year of healing, a year of hope, a year of connection. I want to dedicate my teaching tonight to my extended chosen family, Claire Garabedian, who has shown up and stayed family with me for over 50 years, and to my friend Trix for teaching me how to show up no matter what, and to my immediate family who have borne the brunt of my annual Drash writing, grumpiness, anxiety, negativity, and general mild state of madness and caterwauling for the last 21 years. So I dedicate my teaching tonight to my children, my dude buddy, Gabriel Jordan Singer, my teacher and student, Michael Emmett Zuri Singer, and my grafted apple, Sasha Rosalie Batts Stern, and finally and eternally to my beloved, the incomparable, my rock and my redeemer, Julie Batts. So before I really dive into what I want to say tonight, I have to acknowledge this moment because for the foreseeable future, this is the last High Holy Days ritual that Julie and I will find ourselves behind the wheel in the driver's seat, well acquainted with the map and the route of the journey. And I want to thank all of you who have been on this ride with us for these many, many years. And thank you for your trust and your sense of adventure, for showing up, and for all the years of work that we have done together. Thank you so much. In the lead up to every High Holidays, I doubt and I fret that I have anything worthwhile to say to y'all. It's every single High Holiday Drash I've ever written. The first time that Julie and I led services together for High Holy Days was on September 17th, 2001. Okay, let me just say that again. The first High Holy Days we ever led together was September 17th, 2001. You do the math on that. No one knew what to say that night. If I recall correctly, that drash was written on a variety of scraps of paper in a plethora of inks and pencil leads. But the thrust was basically, be your best self, even in times like these. That's our raison d'etre. That's why we're here. To just show up, even in the face of fear and anger and terror and loss, and just be you. That's about all I remember from that drash. Though I'm sure there must have been a story or something, some long diversion sandwiched in there someplace. But the main teaching was, strive, no matter what, to be the best version of yourself. And so in preparation for writing for tonight, I decided I should just go back and take a look at drashes of ago. And I reread a bunch of them, and what do you know? It turns out that I teach the exact same thing every single year. I use different stories, I use different metaphors, different approaches and setups, but the message is exactly the same. We, the world, the universe, we need you to be you. There's a famous piece in the Talmud about this 1st century BCE punk kid who comes into town, and he goes to Shammai the sage, and he says, if you can teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot, I'll convert. And Shammai, who has no tolerance for that kind of thing, smacks him with a stick and tells him to get lost. So the punk kid goes across the street to Hillel the elder, who, without dropping a beat, says, what is hateful to you, don't do that to other people. That's the whole Torah. The rest is just commentary. Welcome to the tribe. Now go study. Mic drop. That was Hillel's Torah, because actually his answer can't be found anywhere in the Torah at all, but it was the product of his study. It was the product of his life. It was the product of his experience of a world that was very fractured, very broken, very painful, and yet he found it in himself to distill his own Torah. And after spending a third of my life doing this work, I think I may have found my Torah too, which boils down to 3 short Torah-itic ideas. You were created B'Tselem Elohim, as an ever-unfolding emanation of the divine. and ehyeh asher ehyeh. You must be what you must be. So lech lecha, go. Go to yourself. You go be you. Because you exist one and only one time. And without you, reality is not complete. That's my teaching. That's it. That's the distillation of 25 years of constant study, a master's degree in Jewish studies, millions of words read, and God knows millions of words spoken, and an eternity of my blathering boiled down into what I even timed it. It's a 23-second soundbite. Year after year, that's the drash. And so what follows right now is just commentary. I am profoundly aware that this whole high holidays situation is the invention of unanointed folks who followed their hearts, who swam against the tide, who bucked tradition to craft a ritual that addressed the needs of our broken, hurting, and confused human hearts. Because it turns out that going to yourself, like really knowing who you are at your core and living with integrity, that is not easy for us fleshy fruits of a mysterious source. And those innovators, who we now call rabbis or sages or chachamim or tzaddiks, those rabbis saw that humanity needed something egalitarian and immediate and profoundly meaningful to keep us spiritually accountable and personally on track. Then the Torah does not mention something called Yom Kippur. That is an invention of the rabbis. That's the way that the rabbis understood it. What the Torah gives us are two different sets of instructions to set aside the 10th day of the 7th month to carry out certain esoteric temple rites that involve killing and cooking a whole wide assortment of animals, while it also being a day of no work. I'm not really sure how you get those two things to square, and a day on which we should afflict ourselves. The Torah never articulates what it means to afflict ourselves. There's no scriptural prohibitions on bathing or sex or wearing perfume or putting on makeup or wearing fancy clothes. It doesn't say anything about fasting or prayer or wearing all white or shunning leather shoes. None of that. On the contrary, one of the biblical readings goes into explicit detail about burning fragrant incense, about elaborate bathing and dressing rituals for the high priest, and the very, very fancy outfit he sports, something like you saw at the Met Gala, whatever, that place where people were wearing some really weird clothes this week. Anyway, he was wearing something like that, very fancy, very outrageous. Meanwhile, he's supposed to be working his tuchasov to atone for the sins of the people through these blood rites. That ritual bears virtually no resemblance whatsoever to ours. So how did those rabbis get us here tonight from that ancient temple barbecue? Here's the thing. This modern rite, what we're doing right here, right now, tonight, is the byproduct of an utterly destroyed culture. The rabbis fabricated it over a few centuries out of rubble. It is in and of itself a redemption of a time and a place that had gone very, very wrong, which had lost its center and came crashing down. Judaism today owes its existence to that handful of oddballs and outcasts who showed up with their truth, who trusted their gut, that there was more to the Torah than building a fancy abattoir, that God was more interested in love and community than it was in meat and smoke. Those folks were fishmongers and janitors. They were donkey drivers and bandits. They were not anointed or appointed. They were just a bunch of street-smart, visionary, edgy guys who imagined life beyond the demands and appetites of power-hungry and divisive leaders. And without them showing up with all of their radical ideas and counterculture attitude, Judaism would have been completely annihilated in 70 Common Era when the Second Temple and all of its decadent trappings was destroyed. The rabbis were thinkers and pranksters. They argued and they told stories. They postulated and provoked each other. They keened and they laughed. And most of all, they lived full out, messy, problematic, and trauma-filled lives. They weren't pure. They weren't always nice. Some of them were total jerks, as a matter of fact. A few of them were a little enlightened, but basically, they were just a bunch of guys. And yes, I'm sorry to say that they were mostly guys, although I am really certain that most of them were getting most of their good ideas at home with their wives and their daughters. But they were a bunch of guys who were trying to make sense out of a chaotic and a scary world. And most importantly, even in the midst of trauma and suffering, their greatness rested on one thing, and that was that they recognized and celebrated the merits, the talents, and gifts of even their rivals. They learned from each other, and they were gracious and even excited when their arguments or logic was bested by another sage. And this is what set them aside from the politicians and the priests and the power mongers of their time. After the fall of the Second Temple, a group of rabbis were sitting around pondering, why were the first and second temples destroyed? What went wrong? They ask in Masechet Yoma. Why was the first temple destroyed? Their answer, on account of three things: avodah zarah, inauthentic worship; gilui arayot, sexual humiliation of others; and shfichut damim, bloodshed. But, the rabbis argued, during the time of the Second Temple, didn't people know better? Surely they studied Torah and they were doing mitzvot. They engaged in acts of kindness. And why then was the Second Temple destroyed? It was destroyed, they answer, on account of sinat chinam, wanton hatred. And this, they said, teaches us the gravity of sinat chinam. It is equal, maybe greater, than the combined spiritual weight of avodah zarah, inauthentic worship, glui arayot, sexual humiliation of others, and shvichut damim, and bloodshed. You see, there had been centuries of internal division in Jerusalem, which by the first century Common Era led to brutal infighting, betrayal, and treachery between and amongst Jews. By the time the Romans besieged the city, the fractured Jewish community was so weakened from within that it was easy to dispatch. One group of Jews Josephus said that it makes an account of one group of Jews who actually burned the food stores, burned their own food stores. Another bunch raised arms against a competing faction to kill their leader. Even when surrounded, they wouldn't unite against the Romans. Rather, they made it inevitable that the Romans would prevail. Instead of leveraging their wide-ranging skills and ideas and identities, the Jewish faction leaders demanded conformity. They demanded fierce loyalty. The siege lasted 5 months and ended with Jerusalem and the temple in utter, complete ruins. Meanwhile, the rabbis, the scriptural scavengers, the cultural trash pickers, the spiritual jury riggers who were scattered from Baghdad to Alexandria, were reading and rereading the Torah, studying its quirks and its rhythms, listening for its poetry and symbolism. They felt her voice crying out from deep within the scroll, "Darsheni, interpret me." And with fierce devotion to Shema Yisrael, to deep, deep listening and arguing and wrestling, they learned to confront each other with passion and respect. They made an art form out of discursive sparring, and they lauded each other's cleverness, even as they challenged each other with one controversy after the other. They built a new tradition and spiritual path on a foundation of exhaustive and sometimes exhausting arguments. And Baruch Hashem, thank God, while the rest of the Jewish world was tearing itself to shreds, the rabbis were training each other to accept the best ideas for navigating the problems at hand, while simultaneously preserving other solutions that might come in handy in an unrecognizable future. By the time the Romans sacked Jerusalem and razed the temple and crushed the priesthood, the rabbis had already built the first virtual iteration of Judaism. They called their non-temple temple a Beit Tefillah, a house of prayer for all people. They rebuilt Judaism word by word, transforming the altar's blood and stones into blessings and songs. And in this Beit Tefillah, in this house of prayer, sacrifices are made through our voices. Our prayers release the impurity and impediments of our hearts and our minds. We engage in sacred conversations directly with God, to whom you are encouraged to share everything as you would, like with a mentor or a friend or a teacher or a lover, and be met with grace and compassion. And through this new technology came hopes of releasing the soul from its earthly shackles of pain, to be free, to be true, to be present. And tonight, under the not quite full moon, the rabbi's Yom Kippur is still with us, and the priest's is not. Just shy of 2,000 years after they intuited that instead of sacrifices made on the altar to atone for our messes, we would do better to walk our souls down a threefold path back to its spiritual center. Tshuva, turning away from damaging thoughts and behaviors. Tefillah, engaging in spiritual honesty. And tzedakah, actively working for correction through justice and righteousness. The rabbis retooled the pure flesh offerings of old as pure spirit offerings now. They saw redemption as beginning with owning our full story, to recognize all of who we are and have been, to learn from our previous missteps, whether intentional or unintentional, and heal any resultant harm, intended or unintended. That's hard work under any circumstances, but imagine the world out of which these ideas were born. The world of sinat chinam, a world of wanton hatred, infighting, backstabbing, betrayal. How did the rabbis hold all of that and still have faith in each other? Perhaps because they already knew that the greatest betrayal was betrayal of self, and that it was better to be your own messy self than to try to fit into the mold of someone else. And because they were willing to witness each other as perfectly imperfect, glittering, brilliant reflections of the divine oneness of the freaking universe. And that's why it's so important to understand that you are a reflection of this universe. And like the universe, you are constantly becoming, and you must show up to be seen. And the people who see you, who really see you, they are your angels. And the people who see you, and you see them, when you see them, you are their angel. I've been fortunate that I was born to one of those angels. My mom saw me. She totally got me with all of my quirks and queerness, and she never batted an eye. I don't know that I was ever really able to see her in the same way, at least not while she was alive. But these things aren't always mutual. Once I was, as she would say, more than just a jiggling mass of protoplasm, by which she meant once I had gained my unique personality and proclivities, and they were obvious, she made room for me to be me. I was what we would now call gender non-conforming, and she respected that. And when I was around 10, she worked in a factory, and the factory threw a big family Christmas party every year. They had all the parents fill out like a registration form which asked how many sons or daughters were coming so that they would have enough gifts for all of the kids. And the first year, my mom filled out the form and checked that she had one daughter. And that year, I got a very nasty and frilly doll, which was utterly and completely, totally wasted on me. The next year, she filled out the form. She crossed out daughter, and she wrote tomboy and checked 1. I got a spirograph and an Etch-a-Sketch that year, and I got the biggest present of anybody because I got 2 presents, not just 1, because they were covering their bases. They're not sure if it was like Etch-a-Sketch, spirograph, which one is that going to work out? My mom totally saw me. She had my back. and I got to be me as a kid. In the fall of 1971, the first day of 8th grade, I was an awkward excuse of a girl, and I walked into room 121 for my English class, and I met eyes with the teacher, the Natalie-clad Ms. Khan, who was standing behind her desk, upon which was her Louis Vuitton bag slouched. And something about her made me want to stand up a little straighter. It made me want to walk gracefully to my desk. It made me want to not say something really, really stupid. 35 years later, when I came out to her as trans, she would recount to me that upon seeing me walk into her classroom for the first time, she thought to herself, Peter Pan just walked into my classroom. That's one of the lost boys. And I asked her last year, so how did you see that in me? And she said, I looked. I used eye contact to drill into your soul. I was like, dang. And she has been my teacher, my mentor, my champion and friend for 50 years. Because she saw me, she made room for me to be me, and she has been consistently an inspiration for me to be my best self. And I thank you, Rebbe Khan. And finally, I am blessed every day to share my life with someone whose eyes light up when she sees me walk in the room, and she totally sees me. Julie, like the rabbis that laid the groundwork for Judaism to survive, sees with eyes that are clear and honest and compassionate. If I'm a mess, somehow she trusts that I will find my way through it, and I will clean it up, and I will learn what I needed to learn. She taught me long ago that when there is strife or stress clogging the flow, to drop the content and go for connection. And I'm able to see her with love and clarity, no matter the hour, no matter the day. And my eyes light up when she walks in the room. And we make room for each other to be our perfectly imperfect selves, and we are fully at home with each other. So I've been blessed by a parent, a teacher, and a partner who have helped me live and formulate my Torah. They've been my angels who have made it safe for me to be me. So on this Yom Kippur, let's call in all the angels. Let's become those angels. Let's find a way to free ourselves from want and hate. Let's prove that our little drop of divinity can be seen by our children, our students, our partners, our parents, our teachers, and each other clearly. Never stop growing, never stop changing, never stop learning. Go. Go be you. That's it. That's all I've got. That's my whole Torah. Gemar Tov.